things don't go according to plan, you got a plan B, a plan C, but you get down to plan F and it's time to call timeout.
Hey, good morning. And this is Dr. Joel Shertok, president of Process Industries Consultants, a chemical engineering consultancy located in Newark, Delaware. Welcome. My name is Dr. Joel Shertok, and this is my podcast on the modern chemical industry. I am a chemical engineering consultant, and I run Process Industries Consultants, a chemical engineering consultancy out of Newark, Delaware. You can find me at www.processindconsultants.com. And the first victim of my podcast is Jerry Grunewald, who was VP for Invista and has now graduated to the life of the idle rich. So, Jerry, congratulations for surviving the chemical industry.
Oh, thanks, Joel. Looking forward to it.
Fantastic. The idea of these podcasts is to give the casual outsider and the chemical professional an overview of what the chemical industry is today. I got my PhD in 75, which is 50 years ago. And to say that the engineering and chemical industry has changed is like saying, yeah, we're still using AOL for our internet. It has changed radically. Almost all the companies I work for are out of business and don't exist anymore. I used to brag that I destroyed every company I worked for because none of them exist. When I went to outplacement, my advisor said, maybe you shouldn't mention that during an interview, which I thought was a good idea.
Doesn't get you off to a good start.
Nah, not at all. Not at all. So I shut my mouth off. Jerry, what do you want to say? How you want to make an introduction?
Well, sure, Joel, and thanks for the opportunity today. Really look forward to the conversation. Like you, I worked in the industry for a long time. I'm a chemist by training. Got my PhD in 1989, so you beat me by a few years there. And my career has been kind of 50-50 between R&D and operations. Every 5 to 7 years or so, I've bounced back and forth, but always usually focusing on technology, leading change, implementation of new technology, which I've always found fascinating and quite enjoyable. So I just retired, as you alluded to, last week, as a matter of fact, and after 36 years. Pretty much all certainly all in the same industry, in the nylon material science industry. Started with DuPont and worked for DuPont for 15 years. And then DuPont sold our business. So like you, Joel, the various consolidations and changes in the chemical industry. And we were fortunate enough to be bought by Koch Industries in 2004. So I spent the last 21 years then with Koch Industries, and the name of our company inside Koch, Koch's a large conglomerate, and we're an operating company is Invista, and we're the kind of the material science part of Koch, focusing on nylon and polypropylene. But pretty much 36 years, essentially with the same company that itself changed ownership somewhere around halfway through my career.
Yeah, I have been victimized by that any number of times. I'm the former carbider. And
okay, yep, no, well.
During Bhopal. And,
yep.
If there was ever a life-changing experience, carbide doing Bhopal was
absolutely.
the worst year of my life, because you just didn't know what was going on from day to day to day.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So very good. So you were in operations, and I spent most of my career in operations, even if indirectly, as an R&D guy. What were some of the major challenges you found as a guy in operations?
Well, certainly the usual ones of safe operations and being able to. We used to have kind of our mantra was make all we're asked to make, the lowest possible cost, with safety and environmental excellence, and have fun as a team while we're at it. So we tried to incorporate everything in there, but clearly safety and environmental excellence is a big piece of it. But you've obviously got the challenges of optimizing production, maximizing it when it was needed, driving it at lowest cost, but certainly try to have that team and sense of camaraderie. It's you got to start with the people first. So it's the big balance of all those things, and they've all got to be delivered at a very high level to be successful.
That's always very interesting. So one thing about operations is it's unfortunately less predictable than people like to make out. Was there anything in your career there, like a near miss or something that really changed your perspective on what you had to do as an operations guy?
Yes, certainly, and I'm sure we've all got those experiences. And as you say, it takes a Herculean effort just to do what you're supposed to do. I always got a kick in we're dealing with commercial colleagues through the years, and they would say, well, the plants did what they were supposed to do, and I was like, wow, if you knew, the incredible amount of effort it takes to be able to do that. I always say in operations, there's no upside. If you strike that balance and feel this amazing accomplishment that you did what you're supposed to do, well, you do what you're supposed to do. but the slightest thing goes wrong, and operations hadn't delivered again. In terms of a near miss, and I'll give a short little story. And it happened early in my career. This is the DuPont days, and I was at a plant in Texas, and we were making adipic acid, which is one of the nylon intermediates. And as part of the adipic acid process, you also make nitric acid, because that's an ingredient that you use as part of the process. And it was one of those times where we were tasked at maximum rates, and we're trying to make everything we can, and we have a major issue with our nitric acid plant, so we can't run that plant, but we want to continue to run the adipic acid plant and try to make as much as we can. So we were in a very unusual situation of we need to import nitric acid from one of our sister plants, which you can truck in. You don't normally do that, because you'd be trucking a lot, and we were actually trying. It's very expensive. But at this time, the business conditions were such that it was worth the money to be able to, essentially purchase nitric acid, although it was coming from our sister plant, but all the trucking expenses and all to get it there. And we were thinking that we might be able to unload over 20 trucks a day, which is way beyond what you initially thought you would ever need.
A truck an hour, basically.
Truck an hour, basically. That's right. So we had, and the team was, up for it, and in the meantime, we got all this other activity going on. We're trying to fix the nitric acid plant, but now we've got this other team kind of spun up all of a sudden that we're going to try to do a truck an hour. And we had one of our enthusiastic operators, and he was going to try to do everything he could do, and he had already unloaded like 8 trucks that shift. And rather than what most of the typical operators would do, they'd be over there in the operator's shack, which is right near the unloading station, and they would wait for the truck to come up, and the truck driver would get out, and then they'd meet him, and they'd check his paperwork, and there's actually a little sample you do to make sure it's nitric acid. But this guy was enthusiastic, and he was trying to do the best thing he could do, and he was a highly motivated guy. So he's already unloaded 9, and he's standing out in the middle of the road waiting for the next truck to come. So here comes the truck, looks just like all the other trucks. He waves the guy in, hooks it up, hits the pump, and goes to check the paperwork.
Wrong truck.
It ain't nitric acid.
Wrong truck.
It's a glycol solution.
Ooh, that's
So
good.
imagine unloading an organic compound into a tank of 100% nitric acid.
Not good.
So as soon as that glycol, an organic solution, hit that tank, boom, it oxidizes right away, and now sets a pressure wave down the pipeline,
Yep.
which is going to the building. So all of a sudden, that pressure wave going down that pipeline is blowing out every gasket along the way.
And you rupture
Now-
this and your safety
And
meters.
you rupture this. So now we have a 3-block long release of nitric acid, really bad situation. So, the gas alarm goes off. So, I'm the production leader at the time. I'm at the operator, the office building about a block away, throw my hard hat on, go down there. And it's like, what the heck is going on? We've got, small little NOx clouds, not big, like almost like a little chimney smoke, but we got like 8 of them all the way down this block. It's like, what the heck is happening? So I'm getting down there as fast as I can, and the operator's just beside himself. He's circling around. And so I hold him, and I said, what happened? And he goes, it wasn't nitric acid. It wasn't nitric acid. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so the truck driver hands me the paperwork. I was like, oh my God, it's glycol. Well, by now, we've had this release. There's not stuff like pouring out on the line because the interlocks functioned, right? And so, but we still don't know, like, well, what the heck has happened? So I had come from R&D, so I get, there's a plant phone right there. I grabbed the phone. I knew those guys would have been assembled in their conference room. That's their safe haven because the gas alarm is going off. The fire brigade is responding. But I'm thinking, I can't let them go in there yet because I don't know how much emptied into we could have a highly unsafe situation. by now I'm figuring it out, that, this must have oxidized as soon as it hit the tank. Chances are the event is over. But for all I know, we could have a peroxide or something in that tank, and I can't send those guys.
Whoa.
I can't send those guys in there yet. So I get on the phone to the where the technical leaders would be, and this guy I had worked with picked up the phone. He goes, and I said, Mike, it's Jerry. And he goes, hey, ain't that your area? I said, yeah, yes, it is. Just I said, shut up for a minute. And I quickly explained the situation. And then those guys huddled. They said, yeah, it's got to be all oxidized. And I was like, okay, all right, send a crew in there. And by that time, what happened had happened. But so long story. But my learnings from that. And I was a early, that was my like first production assignment. And so what do you learn from that? One of these things is a term that you're probably familiar with, Joel, is this normalizing the deviant. If you step back at what we were doing, we should not have been trying to do that. Yes, it's unfortunate. The business needs the product, but we just lost a unit operation, the nitric acid plant. We've got a lot of attention focused on that. At most, we should have been doing maybe 8 trucks a day, not trying to do that many. That was just too much activity going on. But, for the first couple of days, we were successful. And so you get to that point, you're well beyond what you should be doing. You're way outside the norm.
Complacent.
You say, well, we can do this. And it's like, well, we can do this. We can do this. And the term that, we came to use is normalizing the deviant. Before you realize it, you're way out on that, gangplank beyond where you should be. And you turn around, you look and say, whoa, we're really far away from where we should be. Let's call time out. So that was an early, lesson I learned, in operations that when you start doing, and oftentimes that's the case, things don't go according to plan. You got a plan B, a plan C, but you get down to plan F and it's time to call time out and say, hey, this is really too much for us to handle right now. Let's take a step back. Let's call the commercial guys and say, hey, we don't really think we should be doing that, and let's get our horses aligned before we try to go do this. So, that incident turned out to be not too bad. We were able to get back going again.
Yeah, lucky. It could have been much worse.
Oh, it could have been a disaster. I mean, fortunately, it oxidized right away. Because that whole tank could have blown, and that would have been a really bad situation.
Yeah, I find that everybody wants to be a hero and save the company.
Yep.
And it bites you. I mean, we had a plant in Bamboo, and it was one of those times where people were cranking out money. One of those rare times when you stole every ounce you made in a premium, and the plant was supposed to go down for maintenance. Maintenance.
Yep.
Commercial guy said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. So they pushed it. And they pushed it, and they pushed it, and guess what happened? It went, boom.
Yeah.
It just broke down.
I would say sometimes the plant votes for itself and just goes down.
It says, thank you very much. I am finished today.
And you mentioned that word balance. I mean, you can't just say, well, there's no way we can't do that. I mean, you gotta invite challenge and input. And, the other key learning in that particular incident was no matter what, you have to take the time to do the job, So, I mean, here's, this eager operator, to his credit, he's not just sitting in a shack, he's out there, but okay, that's good, but you got to check the paperwork. You can't hook the truck up and then check the paperwork.
In retrospect, you ask, how the hell can I be so stupid? But in here, the moment, well, I've had 8 trucks coming in.
Yeah. These look right? Just like the other one. That truck was supposed to go, about another 2 blocks down to a different
got lost
unit.
And went down the main gate.
Well, and he waved them in, and anyway, that's how it happens. But so all those lessons, don't normalize the deviant. You've always got time to do the job, no matter how pressing it is. And sometimes you got to say no.
Yeah, I would when I started working, that was still the era of the 30-year veteran, and most of them after 30 years were pretty cynical about just about.
Oh, absolutely.
Everything.
Yep.
And the one guy was a Swiss guy, and he said, "Joel, I don't understand. There's never time to do it right, but there's always time to do it twice."
Yeah. Yep.
And I've seen that application so many times. We haven't got time. We haven't got time. We haven't got time. Oh, we gotta do it over. Oh well.
Yeah. That's. I'm sure we'll get into talking about what's changed in the industry and things like that. But
that's the next question. This matter.
Yeah. Oh, great. So I'll just say this, maybe lead in. You absolutely have to respect those 30-year guys. You and I are both those, and then some. But but you also got to say, hey, there are new ways of doing this, so again, it's that magic word of balance. But anytime you have somebody with some gray hair say, I don't really think we should be doing that, yeah, as a leader, that's you're like, okay, let's talk more about that. What are you thinking about that you haven't raised up yet?
Well, I think the guys you have dependent on your theory are operators, not so much
Oh,
the chemical
absolutely.
engineer, but the operators who have been there and seen that, and they say,
Yep,
you
yep,
know, you
yep.
know. A lot of the engineers, the younger engineers, say, "Oh, what do you know? I've got the
Absolutely.
degree, and you're just an operator."
Oh,
Blah
yep,
blah
yep.
blah, and they regret that.
Oh yeah, I've always had a huge amount of respect for the operators and particularly the first line supervisors. I'm sure we'll get into that as well.
So everybody has war stories. What's your favorite war story about an initiative that you put in and actually worked?
Well, yeah, we got a couple of those. Maybe a success story or at least exciting story. So, in a number of my roles, I've had a chance to, commercialize new technology, and I've actually had a couple of opportunities since I bounced back and forth between R&D and operations. That the technology we were commercializing was the one that when I was in R&D we were developing. So it is about 10 years ago now, and then subsequently we've done it 4 times. We developed a next generation significant breakthrough of one of our nylon intermediates technologies, and that was really fun. So I got to see it go from test tube to bench scale to pilot scale and then commercial scale, and then we wound up doing it 4 times commercially across our platform. So that was really exciting, and one of my learnings from that is the things you're really worried about when you're commercializing new technology. Say, boy, we've got to get this right, and boy, if this goes wrong, it's a killer. And you focus all that; those usually go really well. It's the things that you say, nah, that's no problem. That's not much of a change. That'll be
No
easy.
problem.
Those are the things that eat your lunch. And that was definitely true in that case.
Yeah, we one of the things that I did in my career was basically starting up a pre-preg plant.
Ah, okay, I know it well. Yep.
No, we were trying to explain to our VPGM that this was not the simplest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, "Oh, Joel, come on, how hard is it to put glue in a string?" And
Enormously
yeah,
hard. Yep. Yep.
in general, it's not hard at all unless it's a specific glue and specific string, which needs specific properties. In
Yep.
which case, it's not easy at all.
Yep.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
everybody would be doing it.
That's exactly right. Yep. Yep.
So you and I both go back to the good old days, and when I started working, process control was 3 psi to
Oh
15
yeah.
psi
Yep.
air.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah.
Foxborough Model 40s all over the place,
Yep.
and they
Every
worked.
every unit I went into as a production leader was always in the middle of their pneumatic to DCS transformation, and I thought one of these days I'm actually going to get one of these that is modernized, and I don't have to live through it.
So that leads into questions. So obviously, what has changed since you started? Besides
Well,
everything.
well, yeah, right, right, and well, I mean, just the pace of change, I guess, is true. I mean, we're talking about going from pneumatics to DCS. Those would be like 5-year programs. I remember one of the units I went in, they were in year 6 of a 3-year project to convert, from pneumatics to electronic controls. But now, I mean, you can make conversions a lot quicker. And the lifetime of something, so from 2018 to 23, I led our digital plan of the future effort, or Industry 4.0. What other? There's lots of names for it. Operations transformation. And what's exciting about that was just to realize how fast things were changing. And for me, I had to had to get there myself mentally, and then really explain to my management that these types of projects are not like your typical project. If you're putting in a new column, or a much bigger pump or something like that, you're expecting that to be a 20-year life. And so you look at your capital and you look at your way you approach that project, and I want 20 years out of this. In this whole digital space, in 2 to 3 years it's going to be outdated. You're going to want to put something else in, or a significant upgrade to it. So you have to change your whole way of how you justify those projects, how you look at your economic returns, and just how you train people and get ready for future changes. So a rambling answer to say just that pace of change, and what you need to expect out of your employees. I mean, we were talking about those 30-year employees, and absolutely, you've got, huge respect and huge value for their input, but you can't let them be blockers to things. I've heard operators tell me, well, I'm just not going to learn that. And I was like, well, that's not a choice.
Yep.
Yeah, you
Work
have
the
to.
program, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I have confidence that you can learn that, because I've heard people say, well, I've been out of school 20 years. So it's like, so, I mean, you're learning all the time, you still, watching TV the way you used to watch it. You're still doing banking the way you watch it. You're making all these changes in your personal life. Well, you need to make these changes in your professional life, and you can absolutely do it. And we're gonna help you get there. But so just the pace of change, not only of the equipment, but the expectations for your people and what they've got to be able to do is the thing that just it's just been amazing over the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, but sometimes you can move too fast. I remember
Oh yeah,
Carbide.
yep.
Carbide decided that it knew everything it needed to know about automatic control,
Hmm.
and they built a plant in Taft in '69, and decided it was going to be fully automatic control. Now think
Yeah,
of where the state
the
of the
wor-
art was in
world,
1969,
the world just wasn't ready for that yet.
and the world was not ready for it. And it turned out that the only way you could start the plant up was starting every unit up at the same time.
Oh, yeah, wow,
You
good
just
luck with
hit that
that.
button,
Yeah,
everything to start up, or else it just went boom.
yeah. We've spent a lot of effort over the last couple of years in this concept of state-based controls, which actually Dow did most of the work on. But you talk to people now, and it's like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. But this idea that in APC, automated process control, that's usually the run state, so you're in the run state, you optimize the run state. But state-based controls optimizes all of the states, the startup state, the ramp to steady state, the ramp down from an upset. And it's really a whole complete thought. And it's ultimately how you get to that of, optimizing the whole plant. But you got to recognize that there's these various states you go through, and there's a lot of thought that has to go into that. But we really pushed that in this Plan of the Future effort, and we started up a brand new plan in China based on state-based controls, and it went really well. But it's an example of what you're talking about is the technology was ready for it at that time. Certainly wasn't ready for it in the late 1960s.
I mean, you hear that story and you say, what were you thinking? '69?
Oh, exactly. I always had a great expression, probably not fully culturally correct, but that the pioneers get the arrows and the settlers get the land.
That's exactly what the thing.
Sometime you don't want to be first. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be number two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Let the first guy make all the mistakes, and we'll just capitalize on it.
There we go. Yep.
So I always have a lot of respect for plant operations people because they are always in the pressure cooker. And if you're 100% successful, senior management says, well, I mean,
that's what it was supposed. Exactly. Yeah. What else are you going to do? Right. That's what I hired you for. Yeah.
So if your years of experience, what constitutes a successful operations guy?
Well, certainly that you absolutely emphasized safety and environmental excellence first and foremost. I mean, you got to start with that. You got to talk about it all the time. So folks really do say, well, that's not lip service. You really mean it. You got to demonstrate it. Take those timeouts, take those pauses, and say, hey, I know what the commercial team wants, but we're not ready for that. So it's got to start with that. And then I think the really important thing is, it's about technology. Yeah, it's about a business thing, but first and foremost, it's about people. So you gotta, the KYP, you gotta know your people. And you really got to respect your supervisors. I learned that early on too. Soon after that, nitric acid unloading experiment, one time I was in the control room, fairly young, kind of team leader, ops manager, and I always had this, mantra that don't go into control room unless you've got at least 30 minutes. You can't just pop in for 5 minutes because then everybody says, oh, it was just a flyby. So I would, yeah, exactly. Hey, how you doing? Good luck, guys. Do well today. So I would always block out time on my calendar. So if I went in the control room now, if there was a lot going on or, nobody wanted to talk, then, all right, you could be out in 10 minutes, but make sure you could expend at least 30 minutes so you can, if somebody asks you a question, they want to know why we're doing this or just how the company's doing or anything they want to know, you got time to talk about that. And you want to, a lot more than just know their names, know a little bit about them, know something about their kids, what sports they play in, just, have that relationship. And at any level in the organization, you got to do that. But you also got to recognize when when you might be crossing into the path that your first line supervisor should really be doing. I remember this one time, this guy, and I knew him, I knew his name, knew a little bit about him, but I didn't really know that he was the kind of guy that would always kind of challenge the leadership, push the system a little bit. And he had a particular beef of the way they were setting up overtime on the shift. And what I should have said, and what I've always said from that point on was, well, what's your supervisor say, or have you talked to your team leader about that? But so I got in there, I didn't, I wasn't, I was inexperienced, and so I'm trying to solve his problem, and of course, it was not solvable in the 10-minute, deeper and deeper, right? So finally, I come out, and the shift supervisor, waves me over, and he was a great guy, really good guy, and he says, boss man, it's just, he always used to say that. And he said, how'd that go for you? And I said, well, actually a little bit frustrating. And he says, that's my job. Let me do my job. And I was like, and his name was Matt. I said, Matt, you're absolutely right about that. And I promise you, I'll never undermine you again. And I really did try to live by that, no matter how high you go in the organization, you got to empower the team leaders, below you, give them space. That doesn't mean you just let them run wild, but I mean, the first time somebody raises something, you always say, well, have you talked to your team leader about that? And that's not just passing it up. You have to enable that person to have their chance to, do their work and lead their team. And so I think that's an important lesson as an ops leader is, know your people and empower your team leaders, because you live and die by your supervisors. If they are not, if they're not happy, if they're not motivated, if they're upset about something and you're not addressing that, it almost doesn't matter what else you do. You're not going to be successful.
Yes, what they teach you in the Army is that pay attention to your first sergeant. He knows what he's doing.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And I always said that, and I passed this on to many people that have, come, up, at the same time I did, that, the higher you go in an organization, the harder it is to really know what's going on. And you've got to have those relationships with that, that sergeant or that operator or that mechanic. So when, you really need to know, hey, we're not doing that well. Why? You got to go to somebody who's going to tell you the straight scoop. And and if you don't have those relationships, you're going to waste a lot of time trying to figure out what to work on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that brings us to another topic dear to my heart, is process safety. And my question is, how do you get your operators and your hourly people to actually pay attention to all the safety rules that are written so nicely in your folders?
Well, I mean, you gotta personalize it. I mean, this is not, do it because I said so. Do it because your personal safety depends on it. I mean, unfortunately, in the companies I've worked for, that wasn't that hard of a sell. I mean, people valued that. So in the two companies, DuPont and Coke Industries, they valued that. The company valued that. So it wasn't a hard sell. I mean, what you absolutely want is that, we call it the challenge culture, where everybody in the organization, says, hey, I hear you, but, I got this question, or the last time we did this happened. You really want to make sure that it's not just a policy on the wall, or because somebody said so, well, okay, that's how we're going to do it, and not bring up their own input. I mean, so you absolutely, if you're doing something, that that, it's like, what could go wrong with this? And you have that, discussion about the job, your job readiness check, or whatever you call that. And nobody asks any questions, or nobody says, well, why are we doing it that way? That's a huge red flag. If the team isn't pushing back, or, offering their own ideas, and are just blindly going there, that's a little bit dangerous. In this day and age, and, you got to worry. It's not just your people. You got to worry about all the contractors as well. And, do they understand? Do they feel comfortable, challenging something? And you gotta, it's that experience, or are they saying that because they just want to, they don't want to do it? Or are they saying that because they really have a legitimate concern, and you need to hear their input? But, the advice is, you always got time to do it, the right way, and you have to get the input of the people. When I was an ops leader at the plants, and we were doing something very unusual, or a special procedure, I wanted to individually talk to the mechanic that was going to be in the suit that had to go do the job. How you feeling today? Do you have any questions? Anything you're particularly worried about? Because you never want to have that situation where somebody's in the middle of the job and they say, "Oh, I wish I would have asked this, or I'm not too sure about this." And always, hey, we can always, stop, and call timeout at any stage of the job. You just always want to make sure that if you're doing something unusual, you need to really be thinking about it.
Yeah, I remember that we used to go on. We were assigned to safety teams, external
Hmm.
safety teams, and
Yep.
tour a plant. And we were operating a phenol acetone plant down in Puerto Rico, down in Ponce. And one of the really hazardous operations is decomposing the peroxide that you make.
Yep.
And it was heavily instrumented and heavily alarmed and blah blah blah. And the interlock was always turned off. And we asked the
Goodness.
operator, why is the interlock turned off? Oh, Joel, it always goes off and it's so annoying.
Oh, man.
And we said,
That's
shouldn't that tell you something?
yeah, yep. Holy cow.
Yeah, I
I,
mean,
I get, I get, I feel, I can feel good about saying I never encountered that. Sometimes, you look at it and say, gosh, we've got this thing over instrumented, but you always need to go back and understand why they did it that way. They probably had a good idea. And actually, as I was just saying that, all that's true, when you're doing something unusual. But so many times, the bad incidents occur in the routine, where,
all the time,
somebody's
all the
done this
time.
job many times and, they know better, but, they just, they thought it was okay.
They take that one shortcut that's going to save them a minute, and that's what
Yeah,
does them in.
exactly. Exactly.
That what does them in. So we talked a little bit about challenges, a little bit about culture. If you could look at your career and your perspective, what's the one characteristic that makes for a successful operations guy?
Well, I think we've alluded to it earlier. I mean, be a good listener and really respect your people. I mean, I think you've also got to bring a lot to the table too. Hopefully you've got a vision or, a kind of way that you think can lead the teams to success, and you want to articulate that. Kind of get people feeling that they're part of a winning team. That we're a can-do organization. I used to call it the three P's: pride, passion, and performance. Yeah, and you got to have the first two before you get the third. You got to pride in your unit. If you go walk around a unit, and I would always do this if I came to a new area. And there's trash on the floor, or there's tools left in the field, or hoses aren't rolled up. You think, these people don't really, why is it like this? What? Because it looks like, we don't have pride in the unit. We don't care almost, so I always say if it looks bad, it probably runs bad. So, treat that as your own home. Would you leave a bunch of, if you were working on something in your garage, would you leave all your tools out? Well, then why are the tools in the field? So let's treat it like our house, because it is our house. Have that pride, and then you got to have that passion. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a job. I agree with that, but try to enjoy it. Try to find something that you get excited about. Something that you want to learn more about. Bring that to it rather than just, well, I'm here for my 8 hours or my 12 hours or whatever it be. I mean, clearly there are days like that. You got a lot going on. It's a hard. Today, boy, we got to dig out this reactor that filled up. That's going to be a bad day. But if every day is like that, that's going to be a dreadful career. So find some things that you do enjoy, you get excited about, have that passion about. Because if you got the pride and the passion, then you're going to have good performance. If you don't, it's going to be a long,
Long,
grueling,
hard slog.
exactly. And now if you're day 25 of a 30-day turnaround, that probably is a long slog. But I mean, if it's just day after day, week after week, maybe you should find a new profession because that's going to be miserable.
Sounds real good. So you talked a little bit about the aspects of chemical engineering and aspects of being an operations guy. I'd like to make a quick transition into some more personal stuff. What would be the most surprising thing people would learn about you? One thing that they wouldn't expect.
Wow. Well, I've been a Boy Scout leader for at least 30 years now. So I enjoy that. Spent many a night. They used to call me the Rain Man in the troop. There, it was always guaranteed to rain once a month because we'd be camping once a month. So done that. I really enjoy. Obviously started out, with my own kids, but now work with lots of other young people as well. So certainly enjoy that. I'm a history buff, so particularly a 20th century history buff. So read a lot of World War I, World War II type history. Enjoy that. On vacations, they usually turn out to be history tours as opposed to the usual vacation hotspots.
Yeah, I read that. That is my hobby too, is
Okay.
European history. So
No, outstanding,
you and I
outstanding.
have a lot in common.
Super,
Fascinating stuff.
super.
Fascinating stuff.
Hmm.
So all of us have mentors that guided us in our career at some point. My mentor was a very interesting person. He was Ukrainian, and when Stalin kind of destroyed the Ukraine in the 30s, he crossed over to Nazi Germany of all
Wow,
things.
holy cow.
For World War II. For World War II, served in the German army, wound up running a POW camp for the U.S. Army after the whole thing was over.
Wow.
Emigrated to New York City and got his high school graduation, his Bachelor of Chemical Engineering, and his Master of Chemical Engineering. And he was one of my group leaders when I was just a starting out engineer at Carbide. And needless to say, had a unique perspective on life.
No, absolutely,
But
absolutely.
he was a master chemical engineer because he started off as an operator.
Wow, wow. I've encountered, not as accomplished as that guy, but many of folks that started as an operator and then, went on to get some type of technical degree. They were always the best because they had such a good perspective.
He had the practical knowledge. Now he was not Mr. Charm, and if he made a mistake, it could be incredibly unpleasant. But he had a lot. He had a lot to teach you. If you look
Absolutely.
at the scar, he had
Yep.
a lot to teach you. So who helped you in your career?
Wow, wow, and it would be people like that, you know. My research advisor, I went to grad school at the University of Florida, and he was a bit of a legend in the field, Russ Drago. And what I really liked about him is he, even though he was, very accomplished, I was his 104th PhD student, and he went on to have 120.
Wow.
So I mean, very accomplished, research professor. But I really liked about him because he still had that excitement. He at that point he traveled a fair amount, going to conferences, always trying to raise money and things like that. But he would come into the lab, and he would say, "What do you know today that you didn't know yesterday?" And that was not a rhetorical question. You were supposed to have an answer to that. And then he was, he's just had that thirst for knowledge, and he'd get more excited about your programs than you would at times, and you'd do something, you'd tell him, and it's like, well, I'm pretty interested about this, and he says, oh, that's great, and then he would immediately, tick off the next 5 or 6 experiments you should do. And I would say, like, yeah, that's on my list. And he's like, well, why haven't you done it? And he goes, yeah, he used to say, how can you go home? How can you sleep at night knowing you're right on the cusp of this thing? I mean, just that level of enthusiasm, excitement. I tried to bring that. And then in Coke Industries, I had this great mentor slash idol, John Pittenger. He's retired now, but he's still around, and just a really great thinker, particularly around innovation. And he had this great, and it helped me, in my career, as I mentioned, both in R&D and operations. He said, you always got to know what game you're playing. He says, here's a baseball analogy. He says, if you're in operations, you're fielding. He says, if the ball's hit to the shortstop, you should never make an error. Your fielding percentage should be 0.999. Every ball you get to, you should catch, and you should make the throw and throw the guy out. And he says, so in operations, you're fielding. That's the expectation. He says, in R&D or in innovation, you're batting. And if you get a hit 1 out of every 3 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. So just know the game you're playing, and don't get discouraged by that. And I always found that quite insightful. Now I had my own turn on that though. I said I agree with that. That if you're innovating or in R&D, 1 out of 3 you're in the Hall of Fame. I said, but it does really help if you get that hit in your first or second at bat. Because if you strike out the first 2 times, you might get pinch hit for and never get that third at bat.
Yeah.
So a little bit of early success is key, and he always got a kick out of that. But the other thing that he really had, in addition to that baseball analogy, is he said that everybody underestimates the value of an A player. He says, your A player is not, you typically do the bell curve and you say, these people on the far right of the bell curve, they're your A players. He says, no, your A players are 10x better than everybody else. Maybe even 50 to 100% better. And so you as a leader, you want to, you're leading your whole group, you want to develop people. But invariably what people do is they spend their time on the C player and try to get them to a B. He says, that work on that, try that. But you can't focus so much of your time on that. You have to enable your A players to really get to that 10x to 50x. That's the capability they have. Your organization needs you to really accentuate the people that you think have got the most potential and enable them, as we call it, self-actualize to really get to the highest level they can. That's the role of the supervisor. That's the role of the leader. And I always tried to, internalize that. If you can enable your people that really are stars to be stars, now the organization is going to get somewhere.
It's interesting. I was years and years ago. I was watching a baseball game on TV, and had a rain stop, and the commentators were kind of bantering back and forth to kill some time. And one guy asked a very perceptive question. He said, "Why are all the great baseball managers average players during their career, and the superstar players make lousy managers?"
Yep.
And the conclusion that the average manager understood the average player and knew how to use him, was the superstar manager had no idea what to do with an average player.
There you go. That's pretty insightful.
Very, very interesting, very astuteful comment.
Mm-hmm. And I think, is to run with that. I mean, you got to have that hunger as a leader. I mean, that, I want to, be the best that I can be type thing. If you thought you already were the best, or maybe by the criteria of the day, you truly were, maybe you just aren't as hungry anymore to try to get your organization to be there.
Really good. So one final question. All of us deal in alternate realities. And if you hadn't gone into chemical engineering and operations, what might have you done instead?
That's a good question. Probably some type of teacher type thing, or I don't know, advisor. I really enjoy that. I mean, I've enjoyed the doer part of the job as a scientist or a team leader. But it's really exciting to see an organization be a learning organization and acquire new skills and deploy them and get to a place that they didn't think they could get to, or and that's both in a professional life and personal life as a scout leader or mentor. So I think it would have been something in those fields. I very much admire the people that do that. For a career. It's not rewarded as much as it should be in our society, but absolutely essential.
Yeah, people say, what have you done? I said, I probably would become a history teacher somewhere.
There we go. There we go. Yep.
And I ought to see myself as an alternate ego, as a associate professor of history in a small Midwestern college, about 30 pounds overweight, with a black timberwood sweater and a beard.
Wow, there you go. There you go.
That's my other person.
Yeah, my summer job. I'm from Philadelphia, and I went to undergraduate school, small undergraduate school in Philadelphia, LaSalle College. And my summer job, I was a tour guide for the Park Service. Not a lot of people realize, but Independence Hall, Liberty Bell, Franklin Court, inside Philadelphia is actually part of a national park. It's a national historical park, and that was a great job because you got paid to talk to people, and it, obviously had a lot of history aspects to it. And I'd always said, well, if I was independently wealthy, I'd have been a park ranger tour guide for a career, because it was fun doing that.
Unfortunately, it doesn't quite pay enough to
no,
yeah,
great respect for the people that do that, but you certainly don't make a lot of money at it, that's for sure.
Well, very good. This has been a fantastic session. Jerry, thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it, Joel. This is a neat format, and appreciate a little bit of walk down memory lane, and hopefully inspire the next generation.
Very good. Hey, good luck in your retirement.
Thanks, Joel. Enjoyed it now.